I'm Heidi with Dr. Leo Galland in this remarkable, surprising interview that you absolutely will not want to miss. Hello, Dr. Galland. How are you today?
I'm great, Heidi. It's so good to be speaking with you.
I recently carried your book at a conference and I read the book. Amazing, amazing book. And that's what I really want to talk about today. One of the things I want to ask you is, can you first tell me the title and why you picked that title?
The book is called Already Here. A Doctor Discovers the Truth About Heaven. And the reason we chose it was because of something that my son Christopher said to me after his death in the last conversation I had with him. That's jumping way ahead.
Okay. So I just wanted to get the title out there. So Already Here. So we'll get there. One of the very difficult things that people struggle with is death. It should not happen out of order with what people believe, that parents should go first, die of old age, and then the kids, and so on and so forth. This didn't happen for you this way.
No, it didn't. And of course, the concept that things should happen in sequence,
yes,
in an order, that's based on the notion of time. And we live in a world that is dominated by time. And in my own life and in my practice, my medical practice, time is extremely important. In fact, in taking histories from patients, what I really want to know is, what is the order of events? How did things happen? How did they unfold? Mm-hmm. And so I really, in every aspect of my life, live in a world that's attached to time. But what I learned from Christopher is that time as we know it, or time itself, is, to say it's an illusion is a little strong. It only applies to a fraction of the total universe. And that actually is a notion that is quite consistent with the findings of physicists, especially quantum physicists, when they're applying their science to cosmology.
Yes. It's almost impossible to live without time. So is there a way to live in both worlds of time and no time?
It's really challenging. Meditation is one way to do it. An awareness that time is only, and that the world that is defined by time is only a fraction of the total experience that we have as human beings and as spirits. That's I think that's where it starts. It starts with an understanding that time is a very limited phenomenon.
So maybe you're saying that should not be our main focus, time.
Well, look, I think when you're living, and I had this discussion with Christopher, and we kind of went back and forth about it. And when you're living in the world, you have to live in a world of time. I mean, that's where we are. And
right.
You can't do anything if you're not aware of time.
Yes.
I mean, and time is built into nature, all the natural cycles, day and night, the march of the seasons, the years, we all age. I mean, that's, but above and beyond and outside time, there is a universe that exists, and there are different ways of experiencing or knowing that universe.
Yes.
And so in that universe, there is no time. Time is kind of a byproduct of it. So the notion that this should happen first and that should happen second, that doesn't exist. Everything exists outside of time all at once. And when I can wrap my head around that, it's really a pretty remarkable experience. And it actually makes me smile.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
I have an understanding.
A little bit, I can understand Buddha laughing when I wrap my head around that.
Very good, very good. So maybe it's because people don't want to feel the pain of having to lose a child or their judgments on it. But you have seemed to have found a gift in Christopher's death.
Well, I first of all, what I've realized is what a gift Christopher was, and still is, and continues to be. So, Christopher in life was a brain damaged, special needs child, very challenging to everybody. I mean, he was amazing in so many ways. He was funny. He had incredible insights. He did unpredictable things and predictable things. And he was very affectionate and loving. And he just had an uncanny way of understanding people differently than the way we understand people. And that was one of the things that I came to realize about him. But it certainly was challenging.
Yes, yeah.
And difficult to be with Christopher. Yes. And, he demanded attention every few minutes. So you really couldn't get to rest at all.
Wow.
With his death, I learned so much. And of course, and it started at the moment of his death. It was that experience that I had at the moment of his death that transformed everything. Because without that, I don't know if I wouldn't have been able to take the rest of the journey.
Wow. Wow. He came to you after he died.
He was 150 miles away from us. He was in Massachusetts. He'd been staying in a special community and had been taking a walk. It was early November. He was walking along a flat trail, probably had a seizure, had separated himself from the few people he was with, tumbled down an embankment into a very shallow stream, drowned in about 2 inches of water because of the seizure. But his body temperature was very cold because the water was freezing. So he was being resuscitated in an emergency room. Got a call from the emergency room physician. I asked him to try to warm Christopher before declaring that the resuscitation had failed, because hypothermia can protect the brain. And I had all these crazy, in a situation like that, your mind does crazy things to you. I mean, I'm imagining maybe this is actually going to make him better. Maybe it's going to correct all this damage that his brain had experienced as an infant. And my wife and I were waiting by the phone, waiting for a call. And we couldn't do anything. We felt as if our bodies weighed 1,000 pounds. The air was hard to breathe. It was so heavy. We couldn't even see light. And then all of a sudden, she and I had exactly the same experience, which is part of what was so remarkable. The room seemed to fill with an intense white light. We weren't seeing it with our eyes. We were seeing it with our minds. And Christina, my wife, said to me, I feel Christopher's presence here. He's so bright. But I had already seen the brightness. We both stood up, and there was this feeling in the room as if lightning were about to strike. I mean, I could feel the electrical energy. It was like this high voltage feeling. And then we saw that the light was seemed to be coming from a being. It was a being that had Christopher's face, only totally beautiful, none of the scars that he had had in life. I mean, it was just amazing, and radiating power and joy, something that I have never experienced in life before or after. If there ever was anything supernatural that I've experienced, this was it. And he was with us for a few seconds, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds.
Wow.
And then he was gone. And, and Christina said to me, he was so happy. And he was. I mean, it was a joy and a blissfulness just beyond any kind of joy that I've ever seen in life.
Wow. Wow.
He was clearly, what he was saying to us is, I'm really free, and I am so happy to be free. And I mean, like we wanted to be there with him. You experience this, it's like, whoa,
I
that's where I
want
want.
more. Yeah.
And he was gone, and the phone was ringing, and there was the ER doc on the other end, and I knew what he was going to be saying. Yeah,
Wow.
we warmed him up, and there's still no heartbeat. I said, thank you for trying, because we knew that he wasn't with us anymore. So that was a remarkable, life-changing experience, actually. And we
Yes.
realized, I mean, we were both amazed that this had happened and how lucky we were that Christopher had come to us and shown us this spirit
Yes,
surviving the body.
and you had said that helped you get through the funeral and the next few days. Am I right?
It definitely, it helped us. It's what is kind of amazing to me is how little it did to relieve the grief. I
Mm,
mean, it so I don't know how terrible it would have been without it. It was still
hard.
a heartbreaking situation. And so there are these crazy contrasts. On the one hand, there's this absolutely fantastic uplifting vision, and then you're still heartbroken because the boy isn't there, the flesh and blood person that's so much part of your life. Now, that was stage one of the revelation,
Yes.
and it was only stage one.
Just the beginning.
Yes, just the beginning. So 3 days later, we buried him in the Berkshires. We
Mm.
decided he had been so important in this community that he was staying with, and he'd only been there for 9 months. And I don't know if, I'm not into numerology, but, is 9 months the gestation period that he needed to be there?
Wow.
So we decided to leave him there, and he was buried there. At his graveside, we released 22 yellow helium balloons. And that was a kind of spur of the moment decision
Yes.
that I made. It wasn't even in character. I mean, I don't like releasing helium balloons. But
Right,
just,
right.
because of the environment and all.
Yes.
And I'd had to cut them free from a sandbag to which they were
Yes.
very strongly tied. And so each of them had this like very short yellow ribbon attached to it with a kind of a ragged edge. And so the next day we drove back to New York, and we are driving in Manhattan towards our apartment. We're on Broadway heading into Columbus Circle. And Columbus Circle has a kind of a significance for Christopher because it's named after Christopher Columbus,
Right.
or Cristoforo Colombo, which was his name in Italian.
Uh-huh.
And so I used to call Christopher Cristoforo, and he would laugh. And we stopped at a red light. A yellow balloon drifted out of the sky and hovered in front of our car. It had a short yellow ribbon attached to it. It was like, my first thought was, wow, what a coincidence that is. A child must have lost it in the park.
Yes.
It's like, we're right by Central Park. Well, except if a child had lost it in the park, and this was a very cold day in early November, so there were no yellow balloons in Central Park. That hadn't even dawned on me, but it would have been rising up, and it would have had about 3 feet of ribbon attached to it, not 12 inches, with a sort of jagged edge. I mean, there were 5 people in the car.
Wow.
We all saw it. This was not a vision. This was something material in this world that we live in.
Was it right in front of your car? How close to you?
It was about 10, I don't know, 8 feet above the ground, right in front of the windshield.
Wow.
If I could have, I would have stopped the car and gotten out, climbed on the hood and grabbed it or something. But I couldn't because, we were in the middle of traffic. And then it just kind of sort of bobbed away. And I knew that the balloon itself wasn't the thing as much as I would have liked to have retrieved it as a souvenir. It was, it was really kind of hard to believe. Now, 3 of the people in the car were kids. They were in the back seat. And to them, this was like no big deal. Well, of course, this was one of the balloons that we released. And of course, Christopher sent it. I mean, like, what could be more natural?
Yes.
To my wife and I, to Christine and I, it was even more remarkable than the vision that we'd had 3 days earlier. it was, wow, how did this happen? I mean, how did, I mean, I obsessed about an explanation. The
I
fact
bet.
yeah, like,
Knowing who you
how could
are,
it
I
happen?
bet.
Like, could something like this really happen in the real world? Well, yeah. I mean, a balloon that we released in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, could a day later wind up in Manhattan. I mean, it's not as if we were in Bora Bora or someplace. We're just 150 miles away. But the
150 miles is a
likelihood
long way.
that the likelihood that it would arrive at Columbus Circle as we're
Unbelievable.
stopped at a red light there, that's pretty, I mean, what are the odds of that happening
Well, I
spontaneously?
would say a sign from Christopher.
Yeah, right. So to us, what it felt to me was like Christopher was kind of laughing, and he was saying to me, you know, I know the way you work, Leo.
Ah,
Given enough time, you would have really doubted the vision that I gave you. You would
mm,
have come to think, well, this is a shared hallucination because this was such an intense, um, you know,
experience.
experience, and you and mom are so close, and yeah, so you shared the same hallucination. Of course, the definition of hallucination is it's not really there, so it's highly unlikely that two people would share it. But I would have kind of just come to that. I would have eventually dismissed it.
Yes.
So try to explain this away.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Right.
and and so yeah, he kind of pegged me. I knew he knows me pretty well.
What did
So
it take for him to finally give you enough proof that,
oh, that was enough proof.
okay, so now you're good?
Yeah, now I'm good. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, there is something. This is an extraordinary gift that Christopher has given us. And then about 3 weeks later, I had a third experience, which I realized was from Christopher. And it was another gift, although this was very painful. We're getting ready for Thanksgiving, and Christopher's absence at Thanksgiving was really palpable. I
Mm.
mean, he loved Thanksgiving. He loved being with the family. He would have been there. I started to feel we're setting the table to eat, and it was just going to be a small, just close family, no big celebration. I mean, it didn't feel like a celebration. I started to feel really sick, like I was
Hmm.
about to get the flu. So I went into my bedroom and I laid down, and I knew this wasn't the flu, but I was totally incapacitated. And um, I started to feel Christopher with me, but it was a very different experience for Christopher. It,
Yes.
I felt as if my mind were being taken over, and I was reliving all the traumas of Christopher's life.
Wow.
Um,
Was he showing
all
you
his
this?
disappointments.
Uh-huh.
I didn't feel him as being separate in there. It was kind of like, yeah, he was inside my brain. And I I began to realize the incredible strength of his character while he was alive. That is the way that he was constantly turning disappointment and pain into joy and love.
Mm.
And and I and I could really see for the first time, yeah, this is the way he was.
Mm.
This was Christopher's way. He would. There were so many things that he had difficulty with so many things because of his brain damage, and yet there were so many things that he couldn't do, and and he would have such heartbreak about them, but he always came back with joy,
Mm.
and he just loved being alive, and he loved being with people, and even if people didn't always want to be with him because of how difficult he was.
Yeah.
um
And you had said
so
in your book that he saw love in everybody, no matter what,
oh
where we get frustrated with people.
he 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 had this amazing, and I think I realized this maybe even before his death. He had this amazing way of being with people because he seemed to sense what a person thought of themselves. And he would always show you the opposite. So if you thought that you were like the way he was with people who were even more damaged than he was, and he was around a lot of those people during
Yes.
his short life. I mean, he lived to be 22. The kind of people that everybody else would ignore because they were mute, they didn't even seem to respond. One guy who was in a wheelchair, rocking back and forth, drooling on himself with a football helmet on because he would bang his head into walls. Christopher would go over to a person like that. He would introduce himself. He would smile. He would talk to them. He would treat them like they were just the most important people in the world. There were people who were distressed, who thought they were losers and couldn't do anything right. Christopher could get somebody like that to take care of him in such a way that this person would feel like, I'm a really important person because I'm taking care of this disabled child and I'm being so effective at doing it. But if you were somebody who thought you were pretty important, an authority figure, he could, or if you thought you were, I'm really mature adult. I'm really in control of things.
Look at me, I'm important.
Yeah, look at me. He could turn you into a raving lunatic and really bring you face to face with your dark side and show you, you're not really as smart as you think you are. That is Christopher in a nutshell. I mean, that he spent his whole life doing that with people.
Wow.
And that was an incredible gift.
Yes. So back to Thanksgiving, and what did you discover that was about?
Well, it just helped me understand how the strength of his character, how he had gone through this life, and just always been able to turn pain into joy.
Do you think people have that ability?
Oh,
was he showing you that?
Because right. He is showing me that because that is, in many ways, what it takes to be human. That's what it takes to live successfully in the world. And so I developed a whole different understanding of success. That is, wow. Success is not being important. It's not being smart. It's not being what the world perceives of as successful. It's being like Christopher. It's being able to take all the negativity in the world and turn it into the positive. It's to absorb hatred and give back love. That's success.
Did it change you as a doctor?
Well, I don't know. A couple of people have asked me that. Certainly over time, the longer I practice, I think the better physician I become. And the better I am at kind of understanding people and expressing empathy. But
did it make you more vulnerable, because you had to become very vulnerable to write this book and share this message?
I would say that when it comes to the issue of vulnerability, I think it probably softened the edges. Let's put it that way. As a doctor, you build up defenses, mm-hmm. Which you kind of have to, so you're not overwhelmed. And over time, and I would say it took a lot of time, mm-hmm. I think I found that I don't need those defenses. Mm-hmm. That is, yes. Mm-hmm. So I don't need the walls and the edges. I can.
Yes.
Just
operate
as Christopher
without that.
Right. I can operate without that. I'd say that's something that I learned.
There were two important things in your book that just really caught me. And one of them was presence. And the other one is the opposites. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I first wrote this story. Well, first of all, let me just get to the writing of the book,
Okay.
which is kind of the next thing that happened. So about 4 or 5 years passed. I had no further interactions with Christopher. And I kind of went about my life and my teaching and my practice.
And how were you handling the grief during this time period? Did it get better?
Yeah, well, time kind of softens loss in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still these moments where, yeah, you remember Christopher, you miss him. Um, Certainly my wife and my youngest son would feel them more frequently
Mm-hmm.
than I would.
Yes.
But we'd all kind of share in that together.
Yes.
But, that kind of grief and loss turns into a different kind of quality as time goes on.
Okay.
It's not as if it ever disappears. It's just
Changes.
it changes.
Yeah.
But then what happened next, and certainly the experience of writing the book, was totally transformative.
Well, tell us about that.
Yeah, so it started with a plane ride. I was flying from New York to Los Angeles, and I've made that trip many times. This is the only time that the plane flew directly over the Grand Canyon. And it's amazing to see the Grand Canyon appear from the air. I don't think I've ever had a visual experience quite like it.
Wow.
And I suddenly felt Christopher's presence with me, and I felt as if he and I were outside the airplane. It doesn't last long. It takes about 2 minutes, and you're
over.
And,
Yeah.
and it's out of sight. But
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing. Now, what was especially amazing about it was that before Christopher died, I'd been planning a road trip to the Grand Canyon with Christopher and my youngest son, Jordan.
I read that in your book.
And the last words that Christopher said to my wife were, "I can't wait to go on that trip."
Oh my goodness.
That happened because he died.
Wow.
And so I'm wondering, wow.
What trip was he talking about?
Yeah, maybe it was this one. And then about 2 months later, I was in California again with my whole family for what was actually the second functional medicine conference, which I was speaking.
Yes.
And and before that, about a week before that, I was awakened in the middle of the night with Christopher's voice saying, "You have to tell my story. People need to know." And nothing like that had ever happened before. I woke up, I was shaking. It was like, what was that? So the next week, when I was in California, near the Mojave Desert where the conference was taking place, I was again awakened in the middle of the night by this voice saying, "Tomorrow there will be a revelation in the desert." And it was, wow, what does that mean? And so I had another Christopher experience while hiking in the desert. And that started a series of dialogues which went on over a period of about 10 months, I guess, almost a year, while I was writing the first draft of this book, in which I would ask him questions and he would answer. And he would give me answers that I totally never anticipated. And they would sometimes go off on tangents and I would challenge him.
What were some of the things you were asking him?
Well, I talk about that in the book, but just simple questions like, is Jerry there with you? His uncle who had died about 7 years earlier during open heart surgery. And, his response was, "Well, where else would he be?" Kind of like, come on. And, which then led, but then he would take off into, and his voice was something that I didn't hear with my ears. It was a thing going on in my mind, really. But I knew that this wasn't my voice speaking. And I had to be alone for it to happen. But I didn't necessarily, most of them happened like in the desert, walking along the beach. But one of them just happened in my kitchen while I was cleaning up the table. So they were all different, and each of them was kind of different. But after telling me that, of course, Jerry was there with him, he went into a long monologue about the problem that humans have is that we're all confused about space and time. And we don't realize how illusory they are. And so the last conversation I had with him occurred after the death of a friend of mine who had actually gone up and sung at Christopher's the mass at Christopher's when Christopher died. And this guy was killed by a taxi cab, and it was very tragic, and he had young children. And so Chris explained to me, this is where we got into the most profound discussion about time, like the order of events. And I asked him a question akin to what you asked me. Well, it's not supposed to happen like that. Well, is this like part of a plan, or is this totally random? Like, you helped me understand your death, but what about Peter's? And he went into the most profound explanation of the purpose and meaning of life. Wow. That like totally blew my mind, and took me a long time to really understand. In fact, it took the first writing of the book and then the rewriting for publication like years later, in which I added the publisher thought it was too short, and I needed to add some things for me to really understand it. And I also have to look at quantum cosmology
wow,
for the scientific aspects of my brain to be able to accept that this is not just some flaky, loony thing. That they're really, if you start looking hard enough with the tools of science, this is exactly what you'll find.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So what did he say the purpose of life is? That's a big question.
Well, first he went into an explanation.
Or what's important?
Well, he said, look, you really don't understand time. Like, time is just an illusion. There's only one moment. It's God's moment. It encompasses all time. And then there was a short break there, and I asked him, well, what's it like in heaven? And he said, joyfully, it's what I always wanted. Everyone is here. And of course, that is Christopher. He always wanted to be with everyone. Everyone, even you.
Wow.
So that really blew my mind, because then I really understood this business about time. It's like, in heaven, we are all there together. This is, it's a state of being. It's not a destination that we get to when we die. We're all already there. So that led me to, that led me to challenge him a little bit. I said, well, everyone, what about the evil people? Yeah. What about Adolf Hitler? I felt this, like, it seemed as if Christopher were gasping, and I felt this coldness. And then he explained to me the nature of evil, which is so relevant to the world we're living in today. Basically, he explained about the reason that we are here, and the nature of God. That is, the creation. God is love, or God is loving. The act of loving is God. And in order for there to be loving, there has to be separation. That is, loving occurs between separated beings. So the creation of separated beings that are loved that's where God is. And that love extends to all beings who are each loved for their uniqueness and their otherness. It is the love of otherness and the recognition of that that is divine. That is divine love. And that there are those beings who basically pervert the reason for their existence by hating otherness. That is the origin of evil.
And does that come along with the choices they make?
Yes, because love must be given freely or not at all. You can't be forced to love. You have to give that love.
Yes.
And those individuals who choose hatred instead of love, the rejection of otherness, those beings are evil. Or they are plagued by evilness. And what he said, believe it or not, he had previously explained that each of us has a perfect self, and that our role is that a successful life is one in which we allow the perfect self to find us. You can't find it, or as you can't go looking for it. You have to stop running away from it and let it find you. And he said, believe it or not, each of them has a perfect self.
Wow.
And their eternal torment, this is what hell is, it's not a place, is the separation in their souls that no love can heal.
Okay. Wow.
Okay, so, and, so that's the kind of stuff that I learned from this. I mean, it was pretty amazing and mind-boggling.
Was that difficult? You said you had a mass. Does that tell me you're Catholic, which you would believe in hell and evil? So was that very difficult?
Well, no, rejecting. I mean, I basically don't believe in any of that stuff anyway. The mass was because
ceremonial.
That's ceremonial, but it also, I mean, it felt as if this was an important thing, like the burial was, and it's. I mean, these ceremonies exist for a reason.
Yes.
They exist to help us with transitions.
Yes.
Just as weddings do. I mean, it signifies something that's important to people.
Yes. So you're talking about love and evil as if they're opposites, similar to how do we know how happy or joyful something is if we don't ever experience sadness?
Right. Well, yes. So that's the gift of the opposite.
The gift of the opposite.
Right. So when I went to revisit what I had written, I realized that I could take Christopher's teachings, that what I really learned from them, what they distilled down to were three gifts: the gift of the opposite,
yes,
the gift of presence, and the gift of timelessness. We've kind of talked about timelessness and the illusion of time. And we have actually talked about the opposite, because Christopher was an absolute genius at finding the opposite in people and bringing it out.
I laughed when I read your book of some of his stuff. It was really funny.
And understanding the importance of the opposite.
Yes.
The fact that he was a genius is itself, and my teacher and mentor, is another example of the opposite. Because my spiritual teacher is a being, a masterful being, who in life was a brain-damaged, special needs child, totally dependent on me. And yet, in the greater reality, he is so astonishing.
Wow.
And so powerful.
Beautiful.
And someone who has taught me so much and on whom I am really dependent.
Wow.
So those are examples of the opposite. Now, I already understood something about the nature of the opposite just from being a doctor, from studying philosophy in college, from studying Hegel and Kant and Marx and Engels and all of those 19th century philosophers, because they all understood it and talked about it. You could understand it from reading the New Testament. In the last shall be first, and blessed are the poor in spirit. Jesus certainly understood that.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes.
And what I realized in writing the book is that the opposite, the unity of the opposites, really is the fundamental organizing principle of the world in which we live.
Mm.
It describes everything: change and stasis, matter and energy, and every relationship that's important in the universe is we not is really described through the gift of the opposite, and understanding that is a way to really understand the world deeply.
Wow. Yes.
Now,
Yes.
in order to do that, you have to be fully present. That is, in order, you can do it intellectually, you can read about it in books, but in order to bring that in, so that you understand it in your heart and soul, and it becomes part of you, you have to be fully present and not distracted, not and that means kind of stepping outside of time. If you're watching the clock, if you're um, if you're always rushed, if you're multitasking, which is something that I tend to do because there's so many things that I have to do, those are the enemies of presence. You have to get past them. And Christopher was fully present at all time. In fact, if you weren't present, he would know that. And boy, you would really pay for it with Christopher. When you're with Christopher, you have to be fully present. That's why the only person that he didn't frustrate with his grandmother was his grandmother. When she was with him, she was fully present with Christopher. And she had, the patience of an angel with him.
Mm. So what did it feel like to be present with him? Because he demanded that, in a sense, when he was here.
It was really satisfying. If you could
Oh.
you get there with Chris and you're really present with him, and it just really felt satisfying because you kind of enter into that gift and the way he was.
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Was it frustrating where you had to say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, I have to
let
go
I
of
mean,
that?
because you're always so busy. You always have all these different things to do. Yeah, I remember being on a roller coaster with him once. And, there's not much you could do on a roller coaster except be present on the roller coaster. It was amazing. And the joy that he generated, every time we would come to the end, the guy that was operating it, he would give us another ride for free. He would look at Christopher. And I wondered, like, what is Christopher so happy about being on this roller coaster? I don't think it was the roller coaster. It was the fact that he was there with me.
Yeah.
And I was so fully present with him. That's why he loved that roller coaster.
Sharing laughter and joy.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I constantly, every day, try to remember those gifts, enter back into them, and allow them to enrich my experience of living in this world that's dominated by time.
Yes. So let me ask you one final question. And it might be a big question, so take your time on answering it. I really want to give this message to others, doctors, patients, and let them know how important the things you say are to our world here and how helpful they can be to people that have lost not just kids, but others, parents, siblings. What can you help them with through Christopher's message?
Well, after I had written the book and I was thinking about what is it that I really want people to get from this?
Yes.
Because we in our family, we call it Christopher's book because this comes from him. It wasn't like, okay, this is what I want to communicate. I'm trying to communicate with, I think he
the allergy solution.
Right. So what I realized is that we all, to me, Christopher seems exceptional and unique, but we all have, everyone has Christophers in their lives. People whom they've lost, or people who challenge them or are difficult. And if you can enter into the spirit of Christopher's teachings and understand the importance of the gift of the opposite, and you need to be fully present for that and step outside of time, it really transforms loss.
Mm.
And it transforms grief.
Do you
And
think
it's not as if there's just some simple formula for doing that.
Sure.
Like, oh yeah, this is just think this and do that, or meditate on this. It doesn't work like that. You have to really take this into your heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Do you think that would be the message Christopher would say today to people?
He would say, you're all already here with me and with them.
Yes.
And I mean, he would basically say that everyone is perfect in their own unique way. And so if you can understand their perfection, then you will really you will learn so much from them, and you will grow spiritually. And then you will be able to, and if you can really step outside time, you will be able to realize that you're already in heaven and that you are part of eternity.
Beautiful.
Not something that's waiting for you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And thank you to Christopher for his book.
Yeah, I thank him every day. And thank you for allowing me to express this.
You're welcome. We will talk again soon.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.